Day 1, 7:43 a.m. local, New York City. John F. Kennedy Airport buzzes with activity as thousands of travelers weave through the terminals. Among them, a tall man with nothing but a small backpack orders a sandwich from a coffee shop and takes a seat as he waits for his connecting flight. He's just arrived from Dubai and Los Angeles is his next stop. He coughs once, then absently wipes a trace of mucus from under his nose with the back of his hand. Without hesitation, he presses his fingers against the armrest of his seat, rubbing them in deliberately before standing and moving on. He repeats the action 3 more times, each movement precise, methodical, and then he boards his aircraft. Day 1, noon, local, Los Angeles. The man splutters as he exits the aircraft, making no effort to cover his mouth. A fellow passenger shoots him an ugly glare as they pass through the gate onto the concourse, but the man doesn't seem to notice or care. Checking his phone, he scans the signs for his next gate. On the way, he stops at a convenience store and grabs a Coke. As he reaches into the soda case, his fingers deliberately trail over the tops of several other bottles before finally selecting his own. Now he hurries, reaching his gate with only minutes to spare. He boards a flight to Dallas, Texas. From there, he'll have exactly 72 hours left to live, and in that time he'll make it his mission to ride as much public transport as possible, leaving behind more than just footprints. 3 others, 2 men and 1 woman, mirror his strange journey across the U.S. Together, the 4 will pass through half of the country's major airports within just 48 hours, each of them carrying something unseen, something lethal. Inside of their bodies is a brand new virus, an artificial creation modeled on smallpox, engineered with cutting-edge genetic technology and enhanced by publicly available AI like ChatGPT. This virus has never existed in nature before. That means no living being on Earth has immunity. Infected travelers unknowingly spread the virus to every major American city by the end of the day. Capable of surviving on surfaces for up to 48 hours, the virus is spread both through direct contact and inhalation, making it incredibly contagious. Day 2. Thousands of infected individuals have turned to hundreds of thousands overnight, but no one shows any symptoms yet. Designed for maximum impact, the virus spreads rapidly, but symptoms develop slowly, delaying detection for as long as possible. In a message released over Telegram channels, a terror group claims responsibility for an upcoming attack of catastrophic proportions. The terrorists tease that the attack has already been carried out and there is nothing that can be done to stop it. Nonetheless, the enigmatic message immediately sets off alarm bells within the Department of Homeland Security and FBI, who are quickly to suspect the release of a chemical or bioagent. U.S. intelligence is at a crossroads. The threat could be nothing more than an elaborate hoax, designed to drain resources and send them chasing a ghost. Or it could be real, with disastrous consequences. The CIA wastes no time. Several ongoing operations are suspended as resources are redirected to this new crisis. The first job is starting to assess the group responsible. A new organization, the group has no known ties to existing terror networks. Its motives remain unreadable. Its threat is impossible to gauge. Day 3. The 4 agents tasked with spreading the virus are in critical condition, but their mission isn't over. To prevent the discovery and keep U.S. officials from gaining valuable intelligence, they vanish, choosing to die in complete anonymity. Their bodies won't be found for weeks, exactly as they planned. The terror group celebrates each martyr's death and the impending devastation of American society. Day 4. With no proof of an actual bioterror event, airports across the nation remain open. For years, the CIA had secretly gained a backdoor into the Telegram app, hidden even from its creator. It was an exploit that they wanted to use, knowing that the moment they did, its existence would be exposed and patched. But now, with the devastating possibility of a bioterror attack looming, the president makes the call. The backdoor is activated, uncovering key identifying details about members of the shadowy group. The U.S. government has played its ace card, and there is no turning back. An immediate raid against one member follows. U.S. Special Forces descend on an apartment building in N'Djamena, the capital of Chad. Inside, 2 members of the group hear the approach but leave no chance for capture. By the time the door is breached, they are already dead. Their identities don't remain a mystery for long. Documents recovered at the scene quickly confirm who they were, and they offer the first real breakthrough in the investigation. At 9:18 p.m. local time, Washington, D.C., an ashen-faced national security advisor approaches the American president. One of the members identified in the raid has multiple doctorates from universities in the UAE and Jordan, including a PhD in synthetic biology. Day 5. Strict screening measures have been implemented in every major airport across the country, with travelers forced to wear masks and gloves. Refusal to comply means being denied a seat on any aircraft, prompting massive outrage across the country. a wave of anti-masking sentiment surges across the nation, driven by memes and viral posts condemning the restrictions as an attack on personal freedom. But what most Americans don't realize is that many of these posts aren't organic. They're being driven by bad actors to turn public health into a battleground, ensuring the virus spreads as widely as possible. The perpetrators are the terror group themselves, who have been planning for exactly this event. They unleash an army of bots to spam social media with anti-mask memes and amplify voices of far-right personalities decrying mask mandates as attacks on personal freedom. With no evidence of a bio-attack, though, the government struggles to enforce mask and glove mandates on public transport. A decision has been made that to avoid national panic, the real reason is being obfuscated for now. Instead, the CDC releases a warning of an intense new seasonal flu. This only further angers segments of the American population, with outbreaks of violence against airport employees, police, and security personnel at many American airports and train stations. Meanwhile, the virus has infected millions by now. Unlike natural viruses, which have undergone millennia of evolution and become more survivable, the artificial virus has many weaknesses which the immune system exploits. Many cases of infection clear up completely on their own. However, enough have successfully incubated that soon the infection will spread at an unprecedented rate. Day 6. Knowing nothing about the potential threat, the CDC decides that screening for typical signs of illness, coughing, running noses, and high temperatures are the best bet to try to identify an infected host. However, this rapidly leads to a complete overwhelming of government resources, as these common everyday symptoms are also signs of thousands of perfectly mundane illnesses. The real illness, meanwhile, is only starting to now make its presence known, and only in very carefully selected individuals. This is by design. The most vulnerable of this specific demographic, those already sick, the very young, or the elderly, are starting to show symptoms similar to the normal flu and go largely ignored. Day 7. Hospitals are seeing a slight uptick in flu cases, alerting officials that the virus may finally be showing its face. But without other symptoms, it's impossible to tell if this uptick in flu cases really is the virus making itself known or simply seasonal flu reaching a natural peak. Nonetheless, the CDC sets up monitoring stations at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles and Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. Patients reporting flu-like symptoms are carefully screened, and the first true warning sign is discovered. In several patients, blood testing has discovered the presence of smallpox antibodies. The nation's worst fear has come true. Quarantines of anyone reporting flu-like symptoms are immediately implemented. Anyone displaying coughing, sneezing, or high temperatures is barred from public transportation and immediately detained. The president makes a national address laying out the scale of the suspected threat, a smallpox attack on the United States by terrorists. However, a tidal wave of disinformation and misinformation spreads suspicion and doubts across the population. The terrorists and their army of bots amplify the voices of conspiracy theorists who fear a totalitarian government takeover. The propaganda works. Fueled by misinformation, public outrage boils over and mobs begin to form. Under mounting pressure, authorities are forced to release several detained individuals, despite knowing they are infected. Day 8. Some patients in hospitals reporting flu-like symptoms begin to develop pustular rashes. Lab tests confirmed the discovery of the smallpox virus, the first such discovery since its eradication in 1977. The CDC director is summoned to an emergency National Security Council meeting. Though the virus has been misidentified, it's clear that the U.S. is now facing the worst-case scenario possible, a full-scale bioterrorism event. Believing that the virus is smallpox, vaccines are immediately ordered to be distributed from national stockpiles. The problem, however, is that the national stockpile only has enough doses for a few 100,000 individuals. Vaccine production is underway, but the process is too slow. Scaling up in time to stop the outbreak is impossible, no matter how urgently efforts ramp up. The director of the CDC has grim news for the president. There is no possible way to stop the smallpox outbreaks with vaccines alone. The United States will never produce enough vaccines in time to curb fatalities. The nation is facing the prospect of millions dead, and very few of them will be able to be saved. The president decides to keep that information secret in order to avoid more panic. In a televised address, the nation is warned of the smallpox threat, but the deadly implications are downplayed. The focus is on control, not chaos. Strict quarantines of all infected people are authorized, and airports initiate strict screening procedures. Behind the scenes, the government initiates Operation Dark Winter, an emergency plan based on a 2001 war game where a bioterrorism attack against the U.S. was launched. Governors of all 50 states are briefed on the reality of the situation and the expected mass casualties that will result. The governors are told to keep these details secret, but to begin preparations for the recall and mobilization of their respective National Guard units. Day 9. As part of Operation Dark Winter, the CDC invokes federal powers to take over vaccine production facilities in the United States, and they are immediately ordered to begin the production of smallpox vaccines. However, facing a national demand, it will take months to begin meeting that demand. Building additional facilities and bringing them online could take a year or more, meaning there is no option but to use the capabilities available now. International travel from the United States is barred by nations around the world, stranding thousands of passengers. Likewise, the United States initiates a ban on entry in order to limit infections. Around the world, flu-like cases have also begun appearing, and in Europe, some of these cases test positive for the presence of smallpox antibodies. The president announces a public health emergency and a national security crisis. The National Guard is mobilized to assist with setting up quarantine zones across major cities. The sight of refrigerator trucks stationed at quarantine zones sends shockwaves across social media. Survivors of the COVID pandemic immediately recognize the chilling implication. These trucks aren't for storage, but for bodies. Anger and distrust of the government grows as many, rightfully this time, claim that the government knows more than it's letting on. This complicates government efforts that conduct contact tracing in order to discover an origin, as well as attempts to control the spread of the disease. All flights are grounded until further notice. For the first time since 9/11, the skies are eerily silent. Day 10. Hospitals are starting to overflow with patients experiencing symptoms, but the CDC has finally acquired a sample of the virus itself and begun analysis. The implications are immediately obvious. Despite being modeled on smallpox, it is entirely artificial, a man-made creation with no natural origin. Understanding the virus will take time, how it spreads, how it attacks the body, and most importantly, how to stop it. FEMA is deploying field hospitals to deal with a massive influx of patients as reports begin to pop up of infections in London, Paris, Mexico City, Beijing, and Buenos Aires. Vaccination centers are set up, but not only is the smallpox vaccine ineffective, a fact that doctors still don't know, but the country doesn't have enough vaccines for more than a fraction of the population. Day 11. Martial law is declared, granting the president full authority to deploy the U.S. military alongside the National Guard to enforce quarantines. Troops flood into cities attempting to contain the outbreak, but the military isn't immune. Infection spreads rapidly through its ranks despite strict quarantine measures on bases. For a time, their lockdowns hold until deployment brings them face-to-face with infected civilians. Then the virus finds its way in. The Department of Homeland Security, in conjunction with FEMA, initiates a complete government takeover of the nation's food industry. Rationing has not yet been enforced, but runaway inflation and a stock market collapse have caused prices to skyrocket. A government price freeze is ordered and enforced on critical items like food and gasoline. In Wall Street, trading is suspended indefinitely. The economy plummets, buckling under the weight of uncertainty and disease, only fueling more panic. But the chaos isn't just unfolding naturally. The terrorists have planned for this. Their bot networks flood social media with propaganda and misinformation, amplifying fear, deepening divisions, and pushing the country further toward the brink. Week 3. Halfway through the third week of the virus outbreak, it's become clear the government has been lying about the nature of the virus. The president is forced to admit the true scale of what the United States is facing: a bioweapon, specifically engineered to wreak maximum havoc. The admission, however, is only seen as proof that the conspiracy theorists were right all along, a message once more amplified by the terror group's army of bots. This leads to an explosion of violence and hysteria across the United States. With enough samples now available to study, laboratories across the US and beyond race to unravel the virus's secrets. Their efforts begin to yield results, but the findings are grim. The virus is proving to be even deadlier than they initially feared. Being the first of its kind, though, the virus is quickly reverse-engineered and the first vaccines produced. With the virus now being global, the planet's vaccine industries align to begin mass production of a vaccine. But it'll take months to make enough doses for just half of the planet. The virus's death toll officially reaches 1 million, the majority of fatalities in the United States and Europe. Week 4. Fatalities have now reached 10 million and infection does not yet show any signs of slowing. The virus is appearing in more and more far-flung locations, infecting Africa, the Pacific Southwest, and all across the Middle East. At the UN, the global vaccine effort sparks a deeply divisive question: who should be prioritized? The United States and Europe argue that the distribution should focus on where the crisis is most severe, where fatality rates are the highest. However, representatives from Africa, Asia, and the Middle East all object. Despite only suffering a fatality rate of between 10 and 15%, the virus has still killed hundreds of thousands and will kill more. They argue that focusing vaccinations on their populations would create a global firewall, slowing the spread and protecting the world as a whole. This is entirely unacceptable to the United States and Europe, who are staring at the prospect of 100 million dead in a month's time. With India, China, Europe, and the US having the largest share of global vaccine production, the world is split in two, and the global vaccination effort falls apart. The divide deepens, turning vaccine distribution into a geopolitical battleground just as time begins to run out. Month 2. The United States, along with many European countries, teeter on the brink of civil collapse. The predicted 100 million fatality mile marker arrives halfway through month 2, the virus having erupted like a wildfire and burned its way across the world. Europe and North America have suffered the brunt of the damage, though, with a combined over 80 million dead between the two. International trade has come to a near-complete standstill, with only vital goods being allowed to ship between ports. The economies of the United States, Europe, and China, as well as other nations, are in shambles. Across wide swaths of the world, local governments struggle to maintain control. Month 3. The vaccination effort has led to a stemming of the tide of global deaths, topping out at an estimated 150 million. Many victims have begun to develop natural resistances as well, aiding efforts to wipe out the virus. In a boost to public morale, a U.S. Special Forces operation to capture senior figures of the terror group involved succeeds, allowing the world to finally put a face to the boogeyman responsible. Month 6. The world begins to stabilize as the death toll tops 170 million dead. In the United States, the rate of infection has plummeted to near zero as the virus has been all but wiped out due to a combination of vaccines, quarantine, and natural resistance. Martial law is slowly being lifted across parts of the country, while in other parts, the U.S. government still struggles to re-establish control. The masterminds of the terror attack may have been captured, but their network of AI-powered bots will take years to identify and dismantle. They don't need further human input to do their job and continue to propagate misinformation across the internet, fueling tensions. Year 1. The American economy has shrunk by 50%, causing the worst depression in modern human history. Unemployment sits at over 35%. This is 10% greater than the peak hit in 1933 during the Great Depression. To combat a new epidemic of crime and the ongoing racial tensions, the United States government greatly expands its power, prompting backlash from civil liberty organizations. With the nation still in chaos, the president suspends elections by 1 year, providing even more fuel for domestic extremists who carry out a series of terror attacks of their own. In response, some groups demand the government enact even harsher security measures, inflaming political tensions. Unable to support its global military presence, the United States recalls the vast majority of its forces. F-35 aircraft sit in disrepair on runways across the nation, the military no longer able to afford maintenance and upkeep on more than a small force needed for national defense. The United States and Europe are critically weakened, leading to their recession from the global stage. China takes a prominent lead in global affairs, with no other power capable of challenging it. This leads to an explosion of authoritarianism across the planet, fueled by the Chinese Communist Party's model of governance and finding fertile ground in populations torn apart by racial divisions and suffering from extreme poverty. Disillusioned by political failure and the collapse of global order, several scientists who worked on the original bioweapon begin their own experimentation. If a virus can be engineered with precision, it can be modified again. With no allegiance to nations or ideology, they begin their own tests, determined to reshape the outbreak on their own terms. How do you think the world would respond to a bioterror attack? Would governments contain the outbreak, or would panic and misinformation make things worse? Drop your comments below. Now go check out the zombie apocalypse, how to actually survive a global outbreak, or click this other video instead.